Hey guys, this is Stephen Melin here at Video Game Music Alliance, and I'm super excited because today I get to talk to you about one of my favorite topics ever, and that is budgeting. Now, I know for a lot of people that's probably your least favorite subject in the world, but the reason I'm so excited about it is budgeting is one of those things that a lot of composers struggle with, and I certainly struggled with it when I first started. Especially fresh out of graduate school. I had a master's in music composition, but even though I had all these skill sets with composing and producing and using technology, the business side was just a complete mystery to me. And I felt like it was a subject that composers didn't ever talk about. And even when I kind of poked and prodded other composers about it, especially professional composers, they just didn't want to talk about it. And it was something that was a little bit taboo, something that was very private, and there was just not a lot of clarity about it. So I'm very passionate about being very transparent with you guys because I feel like it solves two things. Number one, it shows you real numbers of what, first of all, is possible in this industry as a game composer. But number two, it also inspires you. I hope it inspires you by seeing real numbers and practical numbers, real numbers about, okay, cool, if I invest my time in that section or that sector of the industry, I can expect a consistent amount of income around this dollar number. And that should really help you because right now, for many of you, you're just trying to get that first $1,000 per month. Or maybe you're already at $1,000 per month and you're trying to get to that $5,000 plus per month category. And in order to do that, you need to understand what kind of dollars are associated with the time effort in these different industry sections. So I hope that this is helpful for you today. I'm very passionate about it. And so what I want to do is I want to walk through my income and expenses from 2022. I'm recording this in January of 2023, so I'm looking back at the last 12 months. And this is something that I've actually done for the last 3 years. And I want to continue doing this because I think it is very transparent and it helps to give those real numbers and give some insights. So today I want to walk through my six-figure income from 2022 and lessons learned. Let's talk through some of the things that I've learned, some things that have gone well, and some things that maybe didn't go so well that I can work on and improve for the new year. Make sure that you download the free template that I've provided for this video. All you gotta do is grab it, and it's gonna be a little bit generic, but it's made to be customizable for your needs. And it's gonna have income tab and an expenses tab. And it'll be two documents. It'll actually be the actual Excel spreadsheet that I use on a month-to-month basis for the business, but also it's going to be this global chart that we're looking at today. So let's dive right in. So here we have for 2022, it was a very, very good year. It was also a very scary year, and I'll talk through that in just a few moments. Specifically right here around March, April, May, maybe you could even say June, July. There's about a 4 or 5 month span where my income was not congruent with my expenses. And I even had a negative month here in July. And we'll talk through some of the reasons behind that. And to kind of give a snapshot of the year, I grew a lot this year. The Stephen Melin Audio LLC grew substantially. It went from one person operation, just me, plus outsourcing. And it made this crazy transition to having an in-house assistant. So I now have an executive assistant who's here in the studio with me. I moved into a physical studio space outside the home, and I hired a marketing team. So those expenses went up drastically. And if you were to compare this year to the previous year of 2021, you can see that the income has gone up. So it went from $129,000 to $161,000. So I'm very excited about that. Roughly 18% growth, which is amazing considering the insane amount of expenses that went up. So my expenses went from $24,000 to $68,000. Isn't that crazy? So it more than doubled. It almost tripled. And I felt that. And there was a season of time there where it just felt impossible. Like, oh my gosh, am I actually going to make it with this scaling, with this growth? And so I hope that today, as we're looking through these numbers, wherever you're at in your journey, that you can find yourself in my story and you can see, okay, cool. This is maybe a little bit beyond where I'm currently at, but this is maybe a roadmap of how to get there. So let's walk through some of the numbers and some of the colors and everything. I'm a huge spreadsheet nerd. I use Excel all the time. So maybe if you're not an Excel spreadsheet nerd like me, this might be a little daunting, a little confusing, but it's okay. Slow down. I didn't start here. This is just kind of where I'm at today after many years of doing this. So a couple of snapshots I want to show here at the beginning. First thing you'll notice is look how wildly different these numbers are throughout the year. So the lowest month of gross income, so that's just the total amount of income before expenses. The lowest month looks like was in February, so that was 4,464. I find that number very encouraging, because if you look back at my previous statements from the last couple years when I've done these videos, my previous lowest numbers were around the 2,000 mark or the 2,200 mark. So that is a huge encouragement to me that, wow, my lowest month has doubled. Because whenever we're planning ahead and we're looking at our expenses and we're looking at our income, sometimes we get really starry-eyed and we tend to look at our best month. I mean, let's look at the opposite, right? My best month was 39,000, right? That's completely different than 4,000. So sometimes it's really easy, perhaps in September when I got 39,000, to look at that month and say, wow, look at me. I'm so great. I'm so awesome. I'm going to make that much every month. And it's just not true, right? Every business has peaks and valleys. The composing industry is no different. We have peaks and valleys. We have high months, low months, high months, low months. But the good news is that the more you do this and the longer you do this, having a business, you can start to find where the pitfalls are. And the pitfalls in my case are any cell that is black represents a zero. So zero money was made from that category in that month. If you look at my previous statements, there were a lot of black squares. And I'm encouraged looking back at this because the lack of black tells me that I've learned some lessons and I've actually applied those lessons. And that tells me that virtually everything that I'm doing in music business is actually working. It's actually generating revenue and therefore generating profit. And the business is growing. And this is all very, very good news. And there are still lessons to be learned because there are certain categories that I probably will not be putting as much time or energy into this upcoming year. But again, the reason we keep these budgets, the reason we log our expenses and we log our income is because it gives us a reference point, gives us some data points, some analytics to compare to previous years to see where we've actually grown. Because ultimately, if you don't track your progress, you'll never know if you've grown or not. And if you don't know if you're growing, if you don't know if you're sliding, you don't know what changes to make. So this is like the most important thing I could ever teach you. And this is something I've taught in private coaching is log your income, log your expenses. This way you can keep track of it and you can actually make improvements. And this is how we grow. This is how you run a business. So a couple more highlights here. So the lowest of the low was 4,400, and then the highest of the high was 39,000. So I'm very encouraged looking back that most of the months were five-figure months, 10,000, 11,000, 15,000, 19,000, 12,000. So that's very, very encouraging to me that even in the midst of adding people to the team, as a team, we were able to not just maintain, but continue to grow. So that makes me very encouraged for this upcoming year. So some other things to look at. Business expenses. Before March, when I moved into the new space and I started hiring team members, my expenses were roughly, you could say, $1,200 a month. And we'll dive into that in a few minutes as well, some of the specifics. It was roughly $1,200 a month. And even in February, I kept it really low. And I think as a composer, we have very lean businesses where there's not a lot of software we need. There's not a lot of gear that we need. But every once in a while, you have to buy some things to maintain, and maybe there's some subscription services you need to run your business. But in general, you don't need a lot of stuff. And I think that's really, really attractive. If you're at the beginning of your career, you're starting to grow, you don't need a lot. And I hope that is encouraging to you. But the second you start renting studio space, or you start hiring a lot of musicians, you start outsourcing a lot, or you hire on team members, the costs go up exponentially. I mean, check this out. In March, almost $7,000 of expenses. And then it kind of averaged out. I'd say around $6,000 per month is kind of the new standard of expenses. And that might sound, make you want to throw up when you hear those numbers. It kind of makes me want to throw up, but that's just the nature of working with other people. And the good news is, now that we've successfully made it to the end of the year and we're here in 2023, it is now a sustainable number. And now that the income has risen with it, it's now sustainable. And it means in this upcoming year, if we want to expand further and bring more people on the team, theoretically we can. But we still want to grow slow. So some other things here. You'll notice that these first few months of the year, the actual net income, the profit, was very, very good until around April, which was kind of the aftermath of spending $7,000 for the first time as a new regular monthly expense. And what happened was, right here in the summer, the income was not catching up fast. And it took a while. I mean, check that out. It was not bad by any means, but from a profit perspective, check these numbers out. Right around here, it got really, really grim, because when you start hitting negative numbers, that means you're having to pull from your savings and just to pay your help, to pay your team. And that just gets a little scary. And thankfully, one of my core values is to always have savings, 3 to 6 months expenses always set aside. And if you have to go through it, you rebuild that immediately. You don't buy new toys for your business. You don't go on trips. You don't do lavish dinners. No. You back it up. You refill those savings. The same goes for home personal finances as well. If you dip into your emergency savings, you need to refill it so that that cushion is there again, especially in this day and age when we have recessions and we have inflation, we have layoffs, we have so much uncertainty, global pandemics, right? Whoever would have thought that would have happened. But thankfully, in September, you'll notice right here, it was almost as if a light switch was turned on. And as a team, we finally caught our breath. We finally figured it out, how to work with one another. We figured out our schedules. We figured out how to work with clients as a team dynamic. And it took about, it took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, almost 6 months to figure it out. And at that point, it's been really great ever since then. We still have challenges, but that's pretty significant. And actually about half of the year's income came from those last few months. And moving forward, we project for this next year that we're going to have another 20% or so gross income increase. And this is what happens when you scale, when all of a sudden you go from a one-person operation, maybe with some outsourcing, whatever, but then you move on to bring other people on the team. You can expect a whole lot more growth more quickly, which is very exciting. And I highly encourage every single one of you get to this point in maybe 3 to 5 years' time. Once you have a consistent income going, that's the time to bring on more people. So let's take a look at the individual categories and let's see what we can learn from here. So in the custom music column, this is really the active income portion. And this is probably the most interesting to many of you. This is actually writing music for video games in soundtrack form, whether it's a one-off track or it's, an actual soundtrack or a portion of a soundtrack. You'll notice that I actually made a whole lot less from custom music this year versus previous years, which is very interesting to me. I don't know if that was a global recession type influence factor, or maybe I was just so focused on growing and moving that I wasn't as attentive to getting clients or going to. I definitely didn't go to any events last year. That was a change. And so that has an impact. But you'll notice that these numbers are not particularly large. We had one larger month in September, and that was due to a game soundtrack, and that was a portion of a game soundtrack. But a lot of these were just like little one-off, write a few tracks kind of thing for various projects. And I put 96% games because this 2,000 here in August was for a podcast, and I think this 771 number is for a little short film video thing I did. So I won't even factor those in. But in general, somewhere around the $50,000 range is all I made from video game music in 2022. And that was kind of an eye-opener to, okay, wow. First of all, this was not as lucrative as I wanted it to be. So what can I do in the new year to actually really invest in game developers and to make sure that I'm present at conferences and I'm present in conversations and I'm being recommended by friends. Those are active things I need to work on this upcoming year. But the other side of it is, okay, cool. Look how awesome it was to have passive income that carried the torch. I mean, check this out. Passive income, and this is literal passive income. These are things that I set up once and they're taken care of and they continue to sell over time. That was $86,000. And then over here in the column of private coaching, that was $19,000. And I picked up private coaching again this year in May because this was directly after some pretty harsh realities of moving and bringing on team members. I needed some cash flow immediately. And one of the best ways to have cash flow is to teach, because with coaching, it's an upfront payment from a student, and it's recurring in the case of monthly billing, and it's for a preset amount of time, whether it's a year or a few months or whatever. And that has actually been a really helpful tool, kind of in my tool belt from previous years as well, that, okay, cool, this is something I need to spend more time on as we're building up the other revenue sources. So for anyone out there that has the ability to teach or the desire to teach, I always recommend that as something in your back pocket, because it's something that you can create your own terms for, and you can start it and stop it, and you can set the number of students you actually want to have. And I have a personal limitation that I only work with 5 people at a time because I need to focus my time on other things, but that still allows me to have that as a revenue source and to get to pour into other people, which I always love doing, but it's also not a huge time investment. So that's just another tool that you might want to use. But in general, that 19,000 out of the 161 didn't really make too much of a dent. But this passive income lane really did the job this year. So when you guys hear me preaching about passive income, this is why. So Video Game Music Alliance was the new experiment of 2022. It was only launched in January of 2022. And so far with 28,000, that's respectable. As of, I think, last weekend, if I'm not mistaken, we're currently in January of 2023, and I was talking with my assistant, and we ran the numbers, and as of last weekend, Video Game Music Alliance is finally profitable. Whew. And I know that you might look at that number, 28,000, how is that not profitable? Well, to be profitable, it's your income minus your expenses has to equal greater than 0. So we are officially profitable, barely, but we're there. And the thing with a new business is it usually takes a couple years, sometimes 3, maybe even longer, to truly be profitable. And we're always planning and investing for the future, for the long term. So I'm very excited that here in 2023, we can start kind of with a fresh slate, that everything we do will be profitable and will allow us to reinvest in that portion of the business moving forward. Conversely, on the complete opposite side, Simple Samples Audio for me was not a huge winner this year, with only $3,900 for the entire year combined. And I suppose this little slot here should have been black. So Simple Samples Audio was a sample library company that I started about 2.5 years ago, and it had a really strong start. But as I invested less time in it, of course, if you don't invest in your business, it's going to slowly fade away. But I learned at the beginning of 2022 that because I don't want to invest the time into maintaining all of this and the marketing and everything, I decided to partner with some other companies that are resellers. And so these companies are still out there. So Simple Samples Audio exists as a brand and product line, but basically I'm selling it through other sellers who market it and run sales and basically just pay me. So even though it's only $3,900, I didn't do anything for that money. I made the products, and then now that they have them, they can sell them when they want to and just get a check. So that I'm happy with that, at least for the time being, and for the foreseeable future, with how much Video Game Music Alliance has become a large portion of my time and focus. I don't feel the need to invest much into Simple Samples Audio for this next year, and we'll kind of see how that goes. Family First Composer is my book that I wrote back in 2018, and it's been a nice steady income. So KDP is the actual publishing of the book, the physical book and the ebook, and then the ACX is the Audible, the audiobook version of it. And as you can see, it doesn't make much. It's like $150 a month, which is nice passive income. It all adds up. I don't have to do anything else to maintain that. Once it's up there, it's up. So that's nice. The real juggernaut of this year, though, check this out, with $39,000 of sales, is from music royalties. So these include Sounddrop, BMI, Audio Jungle, Pond5, Unity Asset Store, Unreal Marketplace, Game Dev Market, and itch.io. So of those, though, Sounddrop was a huge winner. So Sounddrop just means these are soundtracks for video games that I've uploaded over the years. Some of them are video game music covers. Some of them are just originals. And this year, I got the most views or listens that I've ever had. It was around 1.5 million from 2022. And I'm not sure the exact dollar amount that equates to, but on Sounddrop alone, I'm getting around $600 per month consistently throughout the year. So that's pretty nice. It's not 39,000, but really the remainder of that has come from Unity Asset Store and Game Dev Market. And in large part, I'd say about 95% of those sales came from my Game Music Treasury pack. I also now have a Game Sound Effects Treasury, which is like a sister product, and it sells okay. It sells maybe $100, $200 a month, but it's not the thousands and tens of thousands that we're seeing specifically from Unity and Game Dev Market, which really surprised me this year. But some of the larger months, I mean, they're all decent, but some of the larger months, August 3,600, October 9,500, November had 10,900, and December was 3,200. So I'm happy with that, and that is something that I'm going to continue to invest time and energy into, improving Game Music Treasury and just kind of maintaining its status as one of the number one packs on Unity in particular. Down the line, we have a few other categories that don't make as much, but they're still worth mentioning. So affiliates is basically Amazon affiliates, where I recommend products, and sample libraries. This has never been a huge winner for me, but it is still something worth mentioning because $2,700 is not nothing, but it does require a little bit of work. Basically means I'm just maintaining relationships with sample library companies, and when they have new products, they send them to me. So even though $2,700 is not a lot of money to make throughout the year, it's still a nice thing to do because, number one, I'm getting the products for free. These are NFR copies from these sample library companies. So I always have the latest and greatest sample libraries because these companies, I have good relationships with them. I know them by name. I know the affiliate people at each of these major companies, they send me their things, and a lot of times I can negotiate some sort of exclusive deal with my audience. A lot of times that's Video Game Music Alliance members, and I can offer those perks, those special discounts, and it helps the team. And obviously I can make some money for the business as well. So it's a really good deal. A little bit of my time to now have really expensive products that I can also kind of reinvest into the business, which is nice. Udemy courses, historically, ever since I think 2016, if I'm not mistaken, I've been doing this a while, where I've been putting out courses on Udemy, and they've always made a consistent like $800 to $1,200 per month. So this year, $8,200. However, I pulled the plug on Udemy midway through the year. So I think it was around July or so. I pulled the plug with Udemy, and that's why all the sales have declined so much, because the courses are not there anymore. These are just kind of like residual payments from, they don't just pull everything at once. They actually like taper them off over the months, especially since I had a best-selling course there inside Udemy Business. So it just means that, I had to sign a contract that they'll pull this in 6 months or whatever. But essentially, those are all gone. In place of that, I've now repackaged and repurposed those courses plus new courses and new content inside Video Game Music Alliance. And the purpose behind that was, let's just put everything in one place. Let's like create some sort of structure, some sort of pathway to help composers actually grow in their businesses and in their careers. And I think that has been a really good move. And if nothing else, you'll notice that, Video Game Music Alliance with 28,000 so far, Udemy can't hold anything to that with only 8,000 or 8,200. So I think that has been a very good move. And I think in a year's time, when we look back, we'll be able to say that for sure, okay, yeah, that was a really good move. And the last two here are YouTube, Google AdSense, which is basically just plopping ads on my videos on YouTube consistently brings in about $100. And it's not much, but I don't have to do anything for that. And people who have YouTube Premium can just skip ads all the time anyway. So YouTube's making the money. So it's one of those things that because I have a channel that's successful on there, it makes sense to go ahead and earn that money as well at no real detriment to my audience. And then the last thing here is sheet music. And this is just a joke, $28 for the whole year. But I don't do anything. I don't touch those. I just receive the money from work from the past. Obviously, it's not something I'm going to put any more time into, but it is something that kind of sits there and earns. So I'm very happy with how this year went, and I'm excited for how 2023 is going to go. But now let's take a turn and look at the expenses side, because I think there is a lot to be learned from that as well. All right, so you can see here with all of the expenses for the year that I divided these into 4 different sections. And these are actually based on taxes, because at least here in the US, it's important that for my LLC that I am registered as, that for tax purposes, I have to divide my expenses into different categories. And those are medical, services, research and education, and supplies. This is also super helpful having a spreadsheet like this, because every time a month passes, I can add it into this list and keep very accurate accountability of where the money's going. And it's just nice to be able to kind of see an overview of where's the most, like the highest expenses, where's the lowest expenses, and everything in between. So let's take a look. You'll notice that just like with the income side, that January and February were quite low because I was anticipating about to move, about to expand. So I think I was trying to keep my expenses low back in February. And as mentioned before, the average total expenses per month when I was just by myself was around that $1,200 average per month. But again, as soon as we added on business rent, we added on additional websites and emails, we added on obviously more people, especially right down here with a marketing team, with outsourcing, with studio assistant. These things really start to add up over time to that new average of about 6,000, 7,000, somewhere in that range per month. And that's kind of the new normal. But because income is higher, it offsets it and it works out. And you'll notice that the bulk of expenditures are right here in services, which is to be expected when you have more team members. But perhaps the categories that are the most important and interesting to you watching right now, just kind of give some practical averages of what this stuff costs. On average, it's costing me about $1,400 for websites and emails. So those are things like having custom website, so StephenMelin.com, having videogamemusicalliance.com. I once had simplesamplesaudio.com, and there's different emails associated with that. So for my own personal website, I also have to buy Stephen at StephenMelin.com. For Video Game Music Alliance, I have to have Stephen at VideoGameMusicAlliance.com and any of the support emails or other team members. And so that stuff starts to add up. It's nothing terrible, but you have to factor that in. You also have to think about if you're going to have an email client like ConvertKit or maybe MailChimp, right? These are costs that you have to factor in. These are monthly costs that are just required to have email databases of subscribers that you can send your weekly or monthly emails to keep them in the loop of what's going on. And that's how you sell. That's how you sell products and services, is through email. That's very important. Payment fees, these for me are Stripe and PayPal. Make sure that you add these to your business expenses because this is $2,900 that is tax deductible. That's huge. Basically, this is that 3% card transaction fee of whenever someone wants to pay through card. And in our world, everything's through credit cards and debit cards because it's all online, right? These online services and subscriptions. And when you're paid by a client who wants to use PayPal, okay, cool. That's going to cost the extra 3% on there. And that's where you factor that in. Business meetings are things like grabbing coffee with clients and team members or doing dinners and that types of thing. I like to keep that as low as possible, but I think it's still important to have. Internet and phone is just essential to running a business. Software has gone up and down, but on average, it's around that $200, $300 range per month. These are different website subscriptions, things like Adobe Creative Cloud or Microsoft. These are just different software tools that I need to run the business. Google Drive, just having like a lot of space on there. Maybe some of you like Dropbox or RealCrafter, SoundCloud, YouTube Premium, these different services, maybe Spotify or something like that. Just these are the services that I need to operate on a day-to-day basis that are not going away. And as the team has expanded and as we've kind of reached into more territory with Video Game Music Alliance, I've had to add some other things on there as well. For the website backend of, community services and having, the video storage and all these things that the plugins and WordPress and all these things that you just have to be able to run, an e-commerce business. Art, video, and music outsourcing. These are things like custom artwork or hiring musicians to play on tracks. And I'm actually shocked at how low of a number this is. At the end of the year, it's only $3,200. This is something I try to keep very, very low. I'm happy to hire musicians and things, but it's not always necessary. So I try to keep that as low as possible, but also when it's time to hire people to pay a fair price. Studio assistant, obviously that's a larger expense, but absolutely invaluable. So for anyone out there looking to build their business and grow and scale beyond yourself, having an assistant is a game changer because you can give your assistant a lot of administrative tasks, email tasks. That's receiving and sending emails. That's responding to emails, customer service. You can have them send files, organize files. I've had my assistant work a lot on music organization and creating and updating the video game music packs. A lot of site management things. Absolutely the best money you can possibly spend because you're basically duplicating yourself in a sense, and you're having your assistant work on tasks that are not the number one top priority of your time tasks, things that you don't have to be in, that I don't have to be in. But for everything else, client calls I have to be on. Even most of the time, client messages and emails, that's very important. I need to be writing music. I need to be, in the case of private coaching, that's me. I can't replicate that. So for everything else, I try to dish that out wherever I can. And that's been super helpful this year. Over here, I have a column called VGM Alliance Outsourcing. So these are any kind of website builders or programmers, developers, content creation. This is just like little odds and ends help that I hired out throughout the year to the tune of $5,000, which is not nothing, but if you go back to the income, remember this was $28,000, so I only spent $5,000 on that particular item, and this is why I mentioned earlier, having a VGM Alliance marketing team, assistant, software, etc. That's why we've only just broken even, and we're just now turning a profit with VGM Alliance, because there's a lot of money that has to go into the personnel side of things and getting it all set up and getting the machine running, so to speak, and getting that system running. Over here on the research and education side, I try not to spend a lot of money in this, because media streaming and books, these are important. This is part of research. This is part of learning. This is part of growing. But you don't have to spend a lot of money in that. Like, I spend $30 on books every single month because I read about 2 books a month. And that's something that is very important to me. I listen to a lot of music through streaming. I watch not a ton of television and film, but that's a business expense that I can write off because I actively use that as research. Because even though I'm primarily in video games, I also do enjoy writing for film and other types of media occasionally. So it's nice to be aware of what's going on in the world. And obviously there's an entertainment factor there as well. So it's nice that correlates to our careers, that we can write that stuff off. And if you want to, you are perfectly viable to write off video games. But as I've mentioned in some other videos before, when it comes to video games, I have very low self-control when it comes to buying video games. So I make that a personal expense only. That way I only play 1 or 2 games a month instead of just going wild and crazy. Because at the end of the day, with the 5 kids I have at home, I don't have a lot of time to play games anyway. So it's not something I need to go spend a bunch of money on. And in supplies, this was higher than I like it to be. But this $7,600, so much of this had to do with setting up the new studio and investing slightly in some studio gear and just the basics of moving and like rugs and basic furniture and, those types of things that you don't do a lot. And all in all, that's still just a tiny portion of the expenses and the income. So I think it's well justified. Office supplies really just has to do with printing costs and ink and paper and pencils and just the basic operations. Coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. We drink a lot of coffee around here, so that's an important expense. Keeping Amazon subscription, etc. That's been a godsend. So in review, when it comes to expenses, there are obviously a few categories that are significantly higher than the others, and that's the business rent, studio assistant, maybe outsourcing, with Video Game Music Alliance, with art, videos, and music, and the marketing team. So these are things that I would not expect you to have or anyone else to have early in their careers. And those items combined, even if we were just combine a few of those, that kind of accounts for probably about half or a bit over half of this $58,000. So you can see how last year when I was looking at the expenses and it was not 68,000, but rather 24, right? So it's literally tripled just about just by adding a team. So that's just kind of a natural part of scaling. So that's not to scare anybody away, but just kind of put that in the back of your mind that, okay, when I'm scaling, you need to have some reserves. You need to have some cash on hand so that you can sink a couple $1,000 or tens of thousands of dollars if you want to grow really quickly, just to have some momentum that when you do start scaling your team, you're ready for it. And I think it would be wise that you should be hitting in your gross income somewhere around $100,000 before you start scaling, because you're not going to have that much return on investment if you don't have that cash on hand. So that's just my personal prerogative. And so I feel like once our team hits around the $200,000 mark, that we'll be ready to add another person, which we are on track to do for this next year. And you can set your own numbers, of course, but in general, you want to try to grow around 15 to 20% year on year. It's a very healthy business growth. You can do that for the rest of your career. You're going to do really well. And so that's why when you're starting off, it's quite all right that you just have a few gigs and you have some music royalties going on and some affiliates, maybe some courses, maybe YouTube, Google AdSense, maybe sheet music. Maybe you can have more success than me at sheet music. But you get the point that there are so many ways to make income as a music composer. Some of them are directly related to, the active action of writing music for games. But in my case, that's only a third. It's kind of crazy to think, but this past year, it was about 1/3 of my income was directly from writing music. So that means that there was another $110,000 on the table from passive income and coaching. So it'd be well worth considering some other income opportunities for yourself this upcoming year, which leads us to our challenge. For those of you inside our pro group in Video Game Music Alliance, you know that you are part of a lane. And so inside VGMA, we have 3 different lanes. We have the Kickstarter lane, the Launchpad, and the Accelerator. So based on the lane that you're in, we have different assignments, different challenges at the end of our masterclasses to help guide you to more specific goals within your lane. So if you are inside the Kickstarter lane, what I'd like you to do with this is download this budget, take a look through it, customize it to yourself. And I want you to really focus on composing one piece of music that you can use for a music pack in 2023. I hope that this has proven to you that the music royalty side is very viable, and it has single-handedly made up for a large chunk, about $40,000 worth this year. And so, at least for me, so I hope that that can start to get you to that $1,000 mark in the near future. But you have to work towards it. And so I want you to choose one track, write one piece of music that you can start putting inside a music pack this year. If you're inside the Launchpad lane, I'd like you to define one new possible music income stream that you plan to pursue this year. And I want you to actually create a plan to start building that income. So maybe it's something from this chart right here that you haven't tried that might be a good fit. I want you to try it. I want you to actually put a plan in place and share that with your lane. And then for the last group, those in the Accelerator, that means those of you who are already actively earning $1,000 per month or higher, and you're trying to get to the $5,000 plus per month range. I want you to write down one thing that worked in 2022 in your music business. And I want you to write down one thing that did not work. And I want you to change something this year. What is the variable that you're going to change to either pour gasoline on the fire that is already working, or you're going to pour water on the little itty bitty flame that's not really working? So an example for me, I'm going to continue to pour gasoline on the fire of music royalties because that was my top performer. And that is a passive income source for me. So specifically within Unity, Unreal, Game Dev Mark, and Itch, I'm going to continue to improve my VGM packs. From an active perspective, I'm also going to be way more present in the video game industry in general, and I'm going to be way more present at conferences and events, maybe game jams, or at the very least just be in more communication so that I can land more gigs in the video game custom music space. So that's kind of my fire that I'm going to be pouring gasoline on. And then, as I've already mentioned, Simple Samples Audio has already been kind of taken care of, and sheet music. These are things that, with the black squares, that I'm just not going to worry about anymore. I'm pouring water on them, and I'm kind of saying that these are items that I've put my work in. I'm done with them. I'm going to put all my attention and focus on the other things that are going on. So those of you in the accelerator, make sure that you write down one thing that worked last year, one thing that didn't work, and what are you going to do about it? What are you going to change this year? So share that within your lane as well. So there you go. Hopefully that was helpful for you, and it showed you just a snapshot of how my business has been going from the income and expense side of things, and how you can do the same thing. You can track your expenses, you can track your income and see the growth year on, year out. It is super helpful. And my hope for you is that you'll download this spreadsheet that I have for you, and you'll edit it and customize it to your own, and that you will share within your lane inside Video Game Music Alliance, and you'll do your challenge. And that way we can all grow together this year.